football abuse scandal deepens with more allegations and more victims. It centres on convicted paedophile and former coach Barry Burnell, but 4 police forces are now investigating other allegations too.
Also tonight, wicked and monstrous. Serial killer Stephen Port will spend the rest of his life in prison for the murder of 4 young men.
Exclusive, the deal with the tax man that's helped Formula One avoid paying hundreds of millions of pounds.
And Black Friday gives the high street the blues, but we're still spending billions online.
This is the ITV Evening News with Mark Austin and Ranveer Singh.
Good evening. The scale of football's child abuse scandal is dramatically widening tonight, with 4 police forces and more than 1 suspect now involved. Today, yet more former footballers broke their silence about abuse at the hands of youth coach Barry Burnell, who worked with a number of clubs, including Crewe Alexandra and Manchester City.
Although Burnell is a prolific paedophile who abused many victims, it's becoming clear tonight it's much bigger than that. Ben Chapman is outside Crewe Stadium tonight. Ben.
Allegations of child abuse in football first surfaced when one former player, Andy Woodward, said he'd been abused by a youth coach here at Crewe. But just a few days later, and after allegations from several other players, there are now questions about whether football as an institution, like so many others, failed to protect children. It began with stories about one scout, Barry Burnell, but with allegations against more coaches increasing by the day from more and more former players, involving a growing number of clubs. What one victim described as football's dirty little secret is getting bigger. One of those players who spoke about his ordeal this week, the former England player Paul Stewart, says he believes there are many more victims still to come forward.
There are still predators out there. It's not just football, it's sport in general. The access to children in sport is greater than I think in most places apart from schools.
Today, Hampshire became the 3rd police force to become involved, saying detectives are investigating allegations of non-recent child abuse within the football community. Earlier, Cheshire Police said it was investigating allegations made against more than one individual. Until now, their inquiry has centred on the convicted paedophile Barry Burnell, who abused boys while working as a youth scout and coach at Crewe Alexandra. The club says it knew nothing of his crimes until he was arrested in the mid-90s. But the long-standing head of the Footballers' Union told me there were always rumours about what was happening at Crewe in the 80s, though no formal allegations were made.
Whether the FA as the governing body could have demanded more of the club, whether the Football League as it was then could have gone into Crewe and demanded a whole list of answers to questions, one would have to say, with the benefit of hindsight, that clearly should have happened.
Tonight, a special hotline run by the children's charity, the NSPCC, continues to receive calls not just from adults claiming they were abused as children, but from parents too.
I didn't expect the volume of contacts that we've had coming through to come through at this rate, I have to say. But more people coming forward now, particularly ex-professional footballers, and saying that they have been victims of abuse, has significantly encouraged other people to come forward.
What is not yet clear is just how many young people may have been failed by football. Ben Chapman, ITV News, Crewe.
Well, the Culture Secretary, Karen Bradley, today spoke with the FA and the PFA, the Professional Footballers Association, about the scandal and offered the government support. Deputy Political Editor Chris Shipp is in Westminster tonight. Chris, clearly becoming a very serious story, this. Is there pressure for the government to get involved in some way?
Well, Mark, I think the Culture and Sports Secretary has become involved because things have become so serious now. I mean, even in the last hour, there have been 2 quite big developments. One is that the country's biggest police force, the Metropolitan Police, says that it's received information relating to non-recent abuse in football clubs in London. And then also the Secretary of State said that she'd been in touch with the Football Association and the PFA, the Players' Union, to check they're doing all they can. And Karen Bradley added that she hoped the bravery of those survivors who have come forward and have been speaking in recent days would encourage others to do so. But, you know, that does leave questions for what happens with the current big public inquiry into child sexual abuse. They said today, yes, we're looking at institutional failures. We could widen the scope if it were necessary to sports clubs, but then that would be fine if this inquiry was going well. It's not. It's got people leaving left, right and centre at the moment, and yet it's now planning and capable and says it could increase the scope of that inquiry.
All right, Chris, thanks very much indeed.
Relatives and friends of 4 men murdered by serial killer Stephen Port today cheered and clapped when he was told he would spend the rest of his life in prison. Port stalked, drugged and raped his victims before dumping their bodies.
Port's parents have told ITV News that they think their son is innocent and the jury was wrong. But the judge described his attempts to cover up his crimes as wicked and monstrous. Sejal Karia has more.
You should die in prison, the judge told Stephen Port today, as he jailed the serial killer for life for drugging, raping and murdering 4 young men. He'd lured Anthony Walgate, Gabrielle Cavari, Daniel Whitworth and Jack Taylor to his flat before plying them with fatal doses of the date rape drug GHB. Speaking outside court, the relatives of Jack Taylor could barely hide their contempt for his killer.
That sick, twisted scumbag will never be able to hurt or destroy anyone else's family or life. Jack can finally rest in peace. We will always be completely heartbroken as a family.
There were shouts of yes, scumbag, and I hope you die a long, slow death from the families of the victims as the judge handed down his sentence. Some relatives cried, others cheered and clapped when the judge told Stephen Port he would die in prison. He described Port's attempts to cover up 2 of his murders as wicked and monstrous, referring to this fake suicide note he'd planted on the body of Daniel Whitworth, blaming him for another's death, saying, "I took the life of my friend Gabriel. Please do not blame the guy I was with last night." That guy was Stephen Port, who had also written the fake letter. All the bodies were found in or near a churchyard, just metres from Port's flat in East London. But for 15 months, the Metropolitan Police apparently failed to link their deaths. The force has now apologised to the victims' families for missed opportunities. Stephen Port's parents have now spoken to ITV News on the condition their identity is not revealed for fear of reprisals. Astonishingly, they refuse to believe their son is a killer.
I didn't murder anyone. That's what he told me last Sunday on the telephone. So I believe him.
Tonight, as Stephen Port begins his life sentence behind bars, the police haven't ruled out the possibility there may be more victims of his sexual abuse. Sejal Karia, ITV News.
Now, as the Formula One season comes to a climax this weekend, there are serious questions tonight over the handling of its tax affairs in Britain. ITV News can reveal the sport's parent company avoided paying more than £400 million in tax over the past decade.
Not only was it perfectly legal, it had the blessing of UK tax authorities who drew up a special agreement. That, though, is set to change, as our business editor Joel Hills reports.
The final practice before the big race. The cars are in Abu Dhabi, but the world will be watching. Formula One is much more than just the sport. The broadcast rights, the sponsorship deals, the advertising revenues are colossal. Liberty Media is in the process of buying Formula One for more than £3 billion. But there's another reason Formula One is so attractive, as John Malone, Liberty's billionaire owner, revealed when asked about the deal 2 weeks ago.
And I just said, you know, eureka. And even the tax structure is brilliant.
An investigation by ITV News has found that Formula One's tax structure is so brilliant, it has saved the company at least £400 million in tax since 2006. In the last decade, Formula One has paid £98 million in tax in Britain on profits of £4 billion, an effective rate of corporation tax of 3%. The official rate over the period was almost 26%. Here's how that structure works. The money from the races, the TV rights, etc., flows into two Formula One companies, both registered in Britain, both ultimately owned by Delta Topco, which is based in Jersey. Both British companies should be highly profitable, but every year they also receive huge loans, ultimately from Delta Topco. The interest they pay back to Delta Topco goes offshore tax-free to be given out as dividends, and critically, the interest they pay on those loans means they make little or no profit, almost eliminating their tax bill in Britain.
The profits from the UK end up in Jersey.
This is the Formula One business journalist who dug up the tax loophole that he points out has the blessing of the British taxman.
It's perfectly legal, and indeed HMRC endorses it. The Formula One group itself has gone to HMRC and asked, at least put it to them what they're doing and the amount of interest that's being offset against tax, and HMRC has given it a rubber stamp.
The worry for Liberty Media is that its tax agreement with HMRC expires at the end of next year, and the tax law is about to change. The Treasury has confirmed to ITV News that as of April next year, it intends to impose a limit on the amount of interest relief large companies can claim to 30% of their UK earnings. Now, Liberty Media has warned its shareholders that in future there may be a modest increase in the amount of tax that Formula One pays here, but we calculate that had such a cap been in place last year, Formula One would have paid £52 million in tax in Britain instead of just £5 million. Liberty Media does not contest our calculations, but tonight told us its valuation of Formula One included these tax changes. Formula One's current owner, CVC Capital Partners, refused to comment on the existing tax structure. But this MP, a former tax lawyer, is unimpressed.
People say they feel that tax has been avoided.
So this is a case of tax avoidance, pure and simple.
And there are real questions for HMRC. What are they doing to make sure the tax system is secured? What are they doing to end what people feel are cosy deals?
Liberty Media's shareholders have yet to formally approve the takeover of Formula One. The deal may not get the green light.
Yeah, interesting story this, Joel. As you said, the loophole is set to close now. I suppose the question is, why did it remain open so long?
Well, the problem here, Mark, is that HMRC won't discuss individual companies because of confidentiality. And that lack of transparency, I suppose, is not a problem if you think that the taxman is really good and ruthless at collecting tax. But in recent years, a damaging perception has built up that if you're a big company or if you're an extremely wealthy individual, you can lower your tax bill in a way that other people can't. Now, there is nothing illegal about this arrangement with Formula One, nothing unique either. Two other companies have the same arrangement, but it is changing. The government is bringing in this new cap on interest relief, and it will have a profound effect on the amount of tax that Formula One pays. It will rise tenfold, according to our calculations in this country, and other companies face precisely the same pressures. It's all according to good practice. If Formula One stays, its tax bill will rise, unless, of course, it moves its tax base, which it might. It's a global company.
All right, Joel, thanks very much indeed.
French prosecutors say they have foiled an Islamic State-inspired terrorist plot that could have taken place as early as next week. It follows the arrest of 5 men in Strasbourg and Marseille over the weekend. The country, of course, remains under a state of emergency after attacks in Paris just over a year ago, which killed 130 people. Our security editor, Rohit Kachru, is in the French capital tonight. Rohit, how advanced do you think this plot was?
Well, very. Next Thursday, the 1st of December, is when this plot was allegedly due to be carried out. The date had been set, the locations had been researched. This is one of them, the Christmas market on the Champs-Élysées in central Paris, but there were others. Intelligence, police and judicial headquarters, Disneyland Paris reportedly too. Now, plots are being foiled once a month here in France. But President Hollande made clear this afternoon that this was more serious than the others. He said that a major plot had today been foiled. There were 5 arrests last week, 4 in Strasbourg, 1 in Marseille. An arsenal of weapons had been found, handwritten notes pledging allegiance to so-called Islamic State. But significantly, it appears, according to the intelligence, that this was being directed from either Syria or from Iraq, and that someone was using encrypted phone messages in order to coordinate all of this. A remote-controlled plot more than a year after the massacres here in Paris.
Rohit Katra in Paris tonight. Thank you.
Right, still to come on the ITV Evening News. The new law that would make it an offence for people to wear medals they did not earn.
And it's Black Friday, but not as we know it. Why billions of pounds are being spent online.
This is a great vantage point to see the sheer scale of Black Friday. And firms like this have stretched it out into a 10 or 14-day sales bonanza.
But first, Israel's Prime Minister has pledged to punish severely people he branded terrorists for deliberately setting wildfires across the country. The worst affected is the city of Haifa, where around 80,000 people have been evacuated as the fires spread close to urban areas. Extremely dry weather and strong winds are fanning the flames, and Jerusalem and the West Bank are also at risk. Our Middle East correspondent Geraint Vincent has the latest.
The flames got very close to hundreds of thousands of Israelis this week. Fires have raged across northern and central Israel, and they've reached right to the heart of its towns and cities. But there's a question burning here as well. What or who caused them? Israel's Prime Minister suspects arson, and today he pledged to punish those who, he said, tried to burn the state of Israel. There's a growing sense here of a country having to defend itself from attack. The Israeli military has released drone footage of police chasing arson suspects through the Jerusalem forest. Strong winds and no rain made a bad situation worse here, but for members of Israel's right-wing government, most of these fires were anything but accidental, and they've become politicised almost as quickly as the flames spread. Cabinet members have pointed the finger at Israel's minority Arab population. In Haifa, where the communities usually coexist in relative harmony, tens of thousands of people were forced to leave their homes. Dana Nakshon and her mother lost their home to the fire, and they suspect that they are the victims of another form of Palestinian terrorism.
First of all, Haifa is a place that we live together. Okay, I have Arab friends. But there are some groups that are able to do such terrible things, and I do believe that it was planned.
This is not the time for politics, say Israel's Arab leaders, and they point out that there is no evidence yet of militant involvement in the fires. Fire crews from the Palestinian Authority have been helping to damp down the flames, but they have burnt long and far enough to expose the fault lines in a fragile society. Geraint Vincent, ITV News, Northern Israel.
The mother of a man who died after being tasered by the police has told ITV News she's had to wait 3 years for his death to be investigated properly. 23-year-old Jordan Begley was shot with a stun gun in July 2013 and then died 2 hours later. Today, the High Court quashed a report by the police watchdog, which cleared officers of any wrongdoing. But his mother, Dorothy, says it should not have happened in the first place. She told Damon Green about her struggle for justice.
Are you watching this?
Dorothy Begley's son died, and she's never accepted the ruling that cleared police of any wrongdoing. Today, it was torn up, reopening the inquiry into the tasering and physical restraint that was followed by Jordan's death. The horror of watching that happen has left her angry and grieving.
There must have been times where you felt like giving up. It must have been terrible, that feeling.
No, I've never wanted to give up. Never will I give up. Never. If it takes me 10, 20 years, I will never give up. Someone is going to pay for the death of my son. They walked into my house and they killed my son. Now someone should say sorry for it.
And I need the police here as quick as I can, please.
It was Dorothy who had called police the night her son became involved in a dispute with neighbours. She was concerned for his and their safety.
You want to out with an oath, so you need to get someone here quick.
When police arrived, they fired a 50,000-volt taser gun from short range for up to 8 seconds, as well as punching him and restraining him face down. In July last year, an inquest found that the factory worker from Manchester had been mistreated by police officers. The Independent Police Complaints Commission had already cleared them, but asked for permission to overturn its own findings. Today the High Court did just that. The Greater Manchester police officers who were involved in restraining Jordan Begley were placed on restricted duties 16 months ago, following the findings of the inquest. In a brief statement today, the force that employed them said that it would cooperate fully with any future reinvestigation.
Fantastic, absolutely fantastic. I finally feel like now I'm getting justice for Jordan. Someone killed my son and now it's going to be investigated properly, which it should have done from day one.
She says all she wanted was for somebody to say sorry for the death of her son. Now she hopes that may finally happen. Damon Green, ITV News in Manchester.
2 bodies have been pulled from a burnt-out building after a major fire broke out in Manchester's Chinatown. Fire crews made the discovery on the first floor as the property began to collapse. Police say they're investigating whether the victims were sleeping rough.
Labour peer Lord Taylor of Blackburn has died days after being knocked off his mobility scooter by a van. It happened last week when the 87-year-old was crossing a road near the House of Lords. Police say a driver stopped at the scene, but no arrests have been made.
A nurse has been suspended for 2 months for concealing the real temperature of Ebola survivor Pauline Kafaki. Donna Wood recorded Miss Kafaki's temperature as lower than it really was at Heathrow Airport when they returned from Sierra Leone.
And high street sales are growing at their fastest pace in more than a year thanks to shoppers stocking up on winter clothes. New figures have revealed that retailers are performing well above average despite rising inflation and post-Brexit uncertainty.
A new law that will make it a criminal offence for people to wear medals they've not earned moved a step closer today. Approving the bill in the House of Commons, MPs heard there's evidence more people are trying to pass themselves off as military veterans. It's hoped the proposals will protect genuine heroes, as Sally Lockwood now reports.
The medals they wear for serving the country command huge respect and pride. But their parades are being infiltrated by fakes. People wearing medals they didn't earn. For years, Irene Bailey thought she was married to a war hero. Her ex-husband's tales of heroism and injury in Afghanistan got him as far as the Invictus Games. But she later discovered they weren't true.
I thought I was married to a wounded soldier. I thought I was married to this hero. Turns out he was nothing like that. He was a liar, he was a cheat, and he was a con artist.
A new law to prosecute people wearing military medals they weren't awarded came a step closer today, with support from MPs across the House.
And this cannot go on.
Gareth Johnson is the MP calling for it to be made a criminal offence.
Despite the fact that around the world almost every country has some law that protects veterans and makes it unlawful for people to wear medals that are not their own. We don't have that law in Britain. We don't have that protection for our armed forces, and it's about time that we brought in a law that changes that situation.
Some say the bill goes too far, but others say the respect these medals represent needs to be protected.
This government and previous governments have made much of the status of veterans in this country. And here we have a situation where people can openly abuse the system.
But there's a long battle ahead for this bill to become law, protecting genuine heroes and the immense value of their medals. Sally Lockwood, ITV News.
And finally, if you splashed some cash today on Black Friday deals, you're not alone. An estimated £2 billion is being spent in the UK, with many retailers reporting a surge in business.
But in a sign of the times, there were no long queues outside high street stores or fights for the best bargains inside. The best deals and most of the business is now done online. We are in the era of the stay-at-home shopper, as our consumer editor Chris Choi explains.
They expected a rush, but retailers found it was quiet, very quiet. Within hours, Black Friday was being called Slack Friday. The high street shopping bonanza simply didn't turn up. But online, it was a different story.
Yeah, I looked in town and there was no discount whatsoever, and then looked online and there was a 20% discount on there. So I just got loads of bits from there and I'm so happy.
It's just the convenience of getting stuff really quickly delivered, and also of not spending so many hours queuing up to purchase an item.
£4 billion is forecast to be spent over the Black Friday weekend, with almost £2 billion spent today alone. That's 19% higher than last year. Of that, £1.2 billion is expected to be spent online today, but some big firms like Next, Asda and IKEA have opted out of Black Friday.
I think it's often not what it seems to be.
Some retail bosses this year went as far as calling the whole thing a con.
A lot of the time it's with old stock or it's with a price-established product that started off at £100 and actually was only ever worth £70.
But just a minute, Black Friday wouldn't be this big unless shoppers genuinely valued a lot of the deals.
There's no point getting 20% off something that was never worth it in the first place.
For the distribution centres of online traders, this is the busiest day of the year.
This is a great vantage point to see the sheer scale of Black Friday, and firms like this have stretched it out into a 10 or 14-day sales bonanza. But consumers too have got savvy.
High street crowds were noticeable only by their absence, but with prices set to rise next year, this is just the start of what's predicted to be a record-breaking Christmas. Chris Choi, ITV News.
Changing times.
I rather enjoy the bustle of a high street.
Changing times. Yeah. That's it for now. Julie Etchingham will be here at another changing time, and he's at 10:30 tonight.
That's it from all of us. Have a great evening. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.